All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to be looking at one of the absolute coolest mathematical mysteries hidden inside ancient epic literature. When we think of ancient myths, we usually picture massive, earth-shattering battles, divine interventions, and these crazy, sprawling family trees. We definitely don't think of them as places to find strict mathematical continuity, right? Well, in the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata, there is this one specific moment where the narrator is literally stopped dead in his tracks and asked to explain the math. We're going to dive into a source text detailing a bizarre, completely captivating story of creation and uncover how an ancient audience demanded logical consistency even right in the middle of a deeply magical tale. So, at the very core of the riddle we're exploring today is a legendary continuity discrepancy involving Queen Gandhari. According to the text, a single lifeless ball of flesh was produced, and it was subsequently divided into exactly 100 parts. Yet somehow, from those 100 divided parts, the queen eventually produced 100 sons and one daughter. I mean, how does 100 equal 101? It's a literal plot hole being called out in the text itself. It really proves that ancient audiences were just as invested in story continuity as modern cinematic universe fans are today.
Section 1. A mythological math problem.
To figure this puzzle out, we really need to look at the conversation that kicks off this whole inquiry. Our source text is structured as a back-and-forth dialogue between two figures. On one side, we have Janamejaya, the king who's listening to the grand epic being recited, and on the other side, we have Vaisampayana, the super knowledgeable sage who's narrating the story. Janamejaya is basically acting like a modern-day continuity checker here. He's been listening intently to the story of his ancestors, and he suddenly interrupts the narrator to point out that the math simply isn't mathing. He absolutely refuses to let the story move on until this discrepancy is resolved. Janamejaya literally breaks his logic down point by point. He reminds the narrator that a great rishi, a spiritual sage, granted the king Dhritarashtra a boon of exactly 100 sons. He notes that the ball of flesh was divided into exactly 100 parts to fulfill this promise. He also points out that Gandhari, the queen, did not conceive on any other occasion. Now, Janamejaya even acknowledges that there was another son named Yuyatsu, but he was begotten upon a woman from the Vaisya merchant class, so that doesn't affect Gandhari's count at all. The entire crux of his question is this. If there were only 100 pieces of flesh and absolutely no further pregnancies, how in the world was the daughter, Duhsala, born? Moving on to section 2, dividing the flesh ball. Now, what's really wild here is the surreal, almost sci-fi ancient procedure the narrator describes to answer the king's question. He validates the question, saying, yeah, it's a totally fair point, and begins to recount exactly what happened in the room that day. He explains that the great, illustrious Rishi himself oversaw the whole process. Step 1, the Rishi sprinkled water over the ball of flesh. Step 2, he began to meticulously divide it into parts. And Step 3, a nurse carefully took those parts up one by one and placed them into individual pots filled with clarified butter. It's essentially an ancient description of an artificial incubation laboratory. Just picture that wild imagery for a second. It's this highly methodical, almost clinical, yet utterly fantastical process happening piece by piece, pot by pot. You have an ancient sage acting like some kind of mystical surgeon, a nurse assisting with the specimens, and rows of pots filled with clarified butter waiting to gestate the future princes of the kingdom. And it's exactly this incredibly structured step-by-step physical process that makes the mathematical discrepancy of that extra child so glaring to our listener Janamejaya. Which brings us to section 3, Gandhari's secret wish. While this bizarre procedure is happening, we actually get a deeply human internal moment from the queen herself. As the text tells us, the beautiful and chaste Gandhari, a woman of very rigid vows, was watching this entire division process unfold. She thinks to herself, "There is no doubt that I shall have 100 sons, the sage having said so. It can never be otherwise." But then she adds this really profound, quiet desire. "I should be very happy if a daughter were born of me over and above these 100 sons and junior to them all." In the midst of this grand, destiny-fulfilling magical ritual, she simply yearns for a daughter. And this perfectly illustrates why a daughter mattered so much in her specific cultural context. Our source text outlines her exact internal monologue and her motivations. First, she mentions the great affection that women feel for their sons-in-law. Second, and this is absolutely crucial for the spiritual economy of the time, she believes her husband might attain higher spiritual worlds through the merits that a daughter's sons confer. And finally, she just wants that feeling of being supremely blessed, completely surrounded by a massive, complete family of both sons and daughter-sons. It wasn't just about having an extra kid, it was about fulfilling a very distinct social and spiritual joy. To try and manifest this desire, she starts this intense, silent prayer. She's essentially taking an inventory of her entire life's karma. She silently bargains, thinking that if she has ever practiced ascetic austerities, if she has ever given anything in charity, if she has properly performed the sacred fire rituals, or if she has simply gratified her superiors with respectful attention, if literally any of those good deeds hold merit, then let the fruit of those acts be a daughter. She is doing everything she can to spiritually fund the birth of this extra child, while the physical division is happening right in front of her eyes. All right, Section 4, the 101st piece. Let's get to the climax of our story and see how this actually resolves our initial math problem. While Gandhari is deep in this intense internal prayer, the illustrious Rishi finishes up his work. He finishes dividing the ball of flesh and counts out a full 100 parts. He turns to Gandhari and says, "Here are thy 100 sons. I did not speak aught unto thee that was false." Boom! He proves that his initial promise of 100 sons was absolutely mathematically true. But then we get the incredible payoff to Janamajaya's question. The Rishi reveals something absolutely extraordinary to Gandhari. He tells her that there is exactly one excess part remaining from the divided ball of flesh, just one single piece that naturally fell out in excess of the promised 100. So the crucial point here is that the Rishi, possessing immense spiritual power and foresight, actually anticipated her silent prayer. He tells her that this one excess part is specifically intended to give her a daughter's son. He decrees that this 101st piece shall develop into an amiable and fortunate daughter, exactly as she had desired in her heart. In one swift, brilliant move, the text completely solves Janamajaya's mathematical riddle by introducing a divinely ordained physical remainder to the division. And, to wrap up the procedure with the exact same methodical precision we saw earlier, the great ascetic doesn't just hand her the piece. Nope, he brings out one more final pot full of clarified butter and deliberately places the part intended for the daughter into it. It perfectly, neatly closes the continuity gap in the epic text. 101 pieces, 101 pots of clarified butter, yielding 100 sons and one daughter. The math finally, flawlessly works. After Vaisampayana finishes this explanation, he confidently asks King Janamejaya what more he'd like narrated, completely knowing he just successfully defended the logic of the epic. It really leaves us wondering, doesn't it, if a simple mathematical continuity question can prompt a story that reveals such a fascinating blend of surreal, magical procedures and deeply human, heartfelt emotion, what other incredible logical mysteries are hiding in plain sight within these ancient texts? The next time you encounter an ancient myth, pay close attention to the numbers. They might just be hiding the absolute best parts of the story.